Hi there. Today I'm taking a look at a New Zealand Riesling, specifically Felton Road's 2021 Dry Riesling. Felton Road in Central Otago, specifically in the Bannockburn sub-region and actually on Felton Road. The winery was started in 1991 by Englishman Nigel Greening, who started planting the following year, and I think their first vintage release was 1997. The winery has very quickly established itself a reputation for making some of New Zealand's best Pinot Noirs. But I would argue that actually some of their white wines are equally deserving of recognition. They make wines to a very precise quality and very reliably from vintage to vintage. So I think well worth seeking out. They own about 34 hectares of vines spread across 4 locations, 3 of them on Felton Road and 1 at Cornish Point down near Lake Dunstan, so not too far away. This specifically comes off Block 2, which is one of the plots within the Elms Vineyard, and the Elms Vineyard is the vineyard that surrounds the winery and was where some of the first plantings were made. Not only have they made their reputation through being both organic and biodynamic in their viticultural practices, and they're certified for both of those by BioGrow and Demeter respectively, but also their approach is quite meticulous in the vineyard and quite hands-off in the winery, trying to produce mature fruit and to take that characteristic specifically into the wine. So, I mean, in the winery, you'll see shoot thinning, you'll see shoot positioning going on, you'll see leaf plucking and bunch thinning, all to advance maturity in the grapes to make sure that they're fully ripe when they're picked. Picking completely done by hand. This particular wine is pressed as whole bunches to give very clean juice. That juice is then allowed to settle for 4 days until it's completely full and clear. It then ferments with its own ambient yeasts, so those either in the vineyard or that are already in the winery. The wine rests for a while after fermentation with its yeast lees to give it a little bit of roundness. It's not fined or filtered, and it's then bottled to preserve its freshness. Quite straightforward winemaking, but done with an awful lot of care in a winery where all the operations are gravity fed, for instance, and the winery is very much set up for a small batch production, so that everything can be kept separate until a final blending, so that if necessary, there can be selection can go on at the blending stage. Although they do try not to, they try and preserve all the fruit from one vineyard into the wine rather than downgrading it. So it's quite a notable point about Felton Road. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? First of all, the colour. This is pale to medium yellow, perhaps with greenish hints, that would be fair to say. And the aromas. The aromas are a pungent combination of lime blossom, beautiful limey fruit, and then behind that, limey, sort of slightly waxed lime almost. It is quite well defined, but behind that limey fruit, there's a mineral note. You might describe it as flinty, but I think it's more sort of wet stone sort of note there. So let's have a taste. On the palate, the flavours are very much on the front of my tongue. You've got a really crisp acidity and quite an intense limey quince flavour, fruit going on there, that actually has quite good intensity and a slightly creamy texture. but that acidity really is sort of pepping up the freshness. It doesn't have a lot of breadth. It's quite light-bodied, but there's a good intensity to the fruit, and it lasts for a long time. And at the finish, there's more of that sort of lime blossom that you're seeing on the nose. Perhaps a little more of that minerality, and actually, as it sits in my mouth, there's a little bit of development of the fruit starting to show, and you're starting to see a very slightly oily, perhaps petrol-y note to the development. Not a large amount, but just a tiny touch of that. The acidity is so good, but manages not to be harsh, simply because the fruit has such lovely concentration. The alcohol is balanced. It's rounding out the finish, but it's not. It's not smothering it. It's allowing the delicate fruit to show itself, and the result is a really long flavour there. In style, I mean, this makes me think of a lovely, elegant Riesling from somewhere like the Moselle or even the Saar, somewhere really quite cool in northern Germany, just because of its piquancy and its pungency. And for that reason, I think this is a wine, although it's lovely to drink now and would be a great sort of lunchtime wine. It's not too alcoholic, it's fresh, and would pair with with lighter foods. But given its acidity and the concentration of its fruit, I think you could happily age this for at least a decade and probably longer. In the way that German wines will age for a long time, this I think has a lot of potential. So really lovely to try this. Felton Road's Dry Riesling 2021. Thanks for watching. Do join us again. Bye now.